Hi, I'm DM Gallibond. And last week at the table, we look at what happened in the two actual play games I run on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Gallibond. Now let's get on with the show. On Thursday night, we were playing the Essentials game at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. This week, we started with the battle against the skeletal horse. That went pretty quickly. And about halfway through the battle, the wizard realized that he probably had screwed up and that the horse was only attacking them because they had attacked it before. And after the bones were destroyed and it settled, sure enough, the rogue came up and, on careful examination, found bits of tattered barding that indicated that the bones of this horse meant it was probably the horse that had belonged to the hero, the paladin uh, who had been interred here in this barrow. So they thought, "Oops." So anyway, the party explored the rest of the barrow and discovered a couple of more traps, those pit traps like they found last week, and the tombs of the hero and her companions. Along the way, they found some nifty loot. Now, in the bard's tomb, um, they found a loot of illusions, and that went to Finn. Pretty obvious that would be good for him to have. And the wizard in its tomb, in his tomb, they found a necklace of fireballs, and those could come in real handy against a white dragon. Now, it's very interesting that the whole necklace of fireballs, because they realize that you don't have to be a spellcaster to use it, and because they realize that there is a provision in the way that that magic item is written, that you can hurl the entire necklace all at once and detonate all of the fireballs at the same time. They really debated about who should hang on to that, because clearly it's got a shorter range than the wizard's normal fireball spell, which is 120 feet. You can only throw the necklace or one of the beads off the necklace 60 feet. So that would mean that whoever has it would have to be closer to the dragon than the wizard would want to be. Uh, I think in the end they decided that they would let the wizard hang on to it, but he by no means is married to wanting to keep that thing. If it comes to a situation where tactically they decide it's better for somebody else to have it, he's very willing to hand it off to somebody and let someone else use it in the battle whenever they find this dragon. So finally, in the chamber where Lady Tanamir Alagandar was buried, they found her Dragon Slayer longsword. Now, when they disturbed the sword, that triggered an invisible stalker, which the party was able to destroy by letting it go toe to toe with Gorham, who has the best AC in the party. Then they exited the barrow, met up with their centaur friend Xanth once again, and they prepared to make their way towards the logging camp. But that exploration really took the entire session that we had, so we will pick up with heading to the logging camp next week. So tune in Thursday night at 8 p.m. to find out what happens. So on Sundays at 2:30, we play the Walker of Waterdeep, a 5e game where we cross the streams of lore between D&D 5e and Magic the Gathering. So the party met with representatives of the cult of Rakdos, and Oyahusa seemed very enthusiastic even after it was clear that the most dedicated members of this cult offer themselves as sacrifices to the demon lord that oversees the cult in the name of entertaining crowds and amusing the guildmaster. This nearly caused poor Xandri and Oyahusa to come to blows right in the middle of the meeting with the Rakdos representative. Now, for her part, Xandri was so angry with the monk that she stormed off and went to a Boros training facility where she literally destroyed several heavy training bags to work off her anger, frustration, and pent-up fury at her companion. So the rest of the party eventually went to find the half-drow And when they got there, Oyahusa continued to taunt her verbally with the fact that he was joining the Rakdos while also being critical of her technique in fighting. And that was enough so that the two PCs really did throw down into a fist fight. Uh, Now, of course, they're not in the same physical space, so it wasn't the issue between players. And as a DM, uh, I wanted to. I thought I knew what was going on, but I wanted to just step in and take the temperature of the room and make sure that both of the players were on board with the two PCs having PvP. As a DM, I do not try to put my PCs into conflict with each other, but if there's an organic conflict that develops within the party, I also don't want to be a nanny and tell them, no, 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 you can't do that. This is not that kind of game. If the two players really honestly believe that their characters are on a collision course and they both are okay with that and they both, you know, agree to what level of combat there's going to be between the two and what the potential consequences of that are, I'm fine with there being PvP in the campaign. The thing I want to try to avoid is when conflict between characters becomes conflict between players. And it was very clear in the discussion that uh, this was actually something that both the players had kind of been thinking about and had realized their characters were kind of on a course, and they were very curious to see how that was going to play out. So they were all on board with it. All the other players were on board with it, and I was like, okay, fine, we'll go ahead and do that. And it turned out to be pretty humorous as the DM because uh, the uh, the uh, the outcome was that mostly the two PCs kept missing each other with blows, and failing to land the kind of subdual damage that they each hoped would lay the other PC out on the floor, because they were both trying to stun uh, each other into knocking them down and getting them out of the fight. Uh, and neither one of them could really land a blow that did the trick. So after the characters exhausted themselves, everyone went back to the quarters for the night, and they learned that their cook Briska had been working on a very special dish from Waterdeep, the chocolate cake that's traditionally served for the Grand Revel on which is a holiday that happens on Alturiac 14. Uh, Now everyone enjoyed the chocolate cake, and I got to have one of those really great moments as a DM where the party, now that they had sort of met with all of the guild representatives, they all had a discussion which just organically grew out of them talking about what their characters were thinking, and they were doing this all in character. So I just got to turn off my mic and sit back for a good 20 or 30 minutes and listen to them just all go back and forth and carry the entire scene. So it was a lot of fun for me just to um, not have to feel like I was giving them things to work off of because they were giving it to each other, which was great. And now, after that scene, we had our break, and at the end of the break, everyone realized that enjoying that chocolate cake so much might not have been the best idea because they all failed their constitution saving throws, and it meant that they all succumbed to the sleep poison that had been put into the batter. So when they awoke, they were beyond the limits of the city, out in the Gruul lands, where they met with members of the Zerta clan. Um, And the Zerta talked about how their druids honored the old ways from before Ravnica's other guilds had poisoned the air and raped the land and drained the rivers by building their massive cities. To the Gruul, the cities themselves are a blight on the world, and they wait for the day that their great boar god will come and root up the cities and tear down the edifice of civilization that the other guilds have built. So, after they learned that the Zurta, especially their druids, care for animals and bond with animal companions, Galabar enthusiastically joined them. He was clapped on the shoulder and the back by the humans, the elves, the centaurs, as well as the goblins, the trolls, and the ettins that make up the clan. And the clan provided an escort to the party to get back to the rubble belt just outside the forest precinct. Now, one of the other things that came out of this was that uh, they saw that here in Ravnica, the different races that are always at each other's throats in uh, Toril are not necessarily at each other's throats this way, because as the druid, who is a centaur, was talking about the old ways, and the party was talking about how there were there were forests and things like that. There was one of the Ettins that spoke up and says, "Oh, lady, oh, what is a forest?" And so several times they had to ask what the meaning of certain words were that, just are very common to the adventurers. But because Ravnica has been so ravaged by uh, the overreach and overbuilding of the city, and the natural ecosystem has been so scarred and depleted that it's just a wasteland outside the city, and these people from the Gruul, they have no concept of what this is, and so it made the PCs all really sympathetic towards the Gruul, and because they they really haven't liked many of the guilds. Um, guilds again, the guilds are all awful, really. I mean, they all are so flawed. There's really no good guild there at all. Some of them have decided they will join guilds for their own purposes because of what they think they can get out of it to help the party. But you know, in terms of the politics and their attitudes towards the other guilds, and in some cases their recklessness, in some cases their just sheer desire to dominate and control other people or manipulate others. Nobody likes them. And that was one of the things that came out of that discussion, is that everybody realized that the reason Oyahusa was joining the Rakdos is not because he feels any affinity for them, but because he feels they may well be the most dangerous of all the guilds, and somebody needs to keep an eye on them. And he thinks, what better way to keep an eye on them than to join them and keep an eye on them from the inside. Now, some of the others think that's a pretty dangerous way of going about it, and it may well prove to be true. But it's a nice, bold move, and I like that it's very in character for Orihusa to be the one that's always wanting to, uh, you know, see where the biggest threat may be coming from, and try to get as much information about it so that he can figure out what's going on there. So as the party crossed the last mile of the rubble belt to reach the gates, they became aware of movement in the shadows and behind the boulders around them, and they knew they were being watched and possibly were about to be ambushed. But we ran out of time for the session there, and we will pick up with whatever happens after this next week. So join us next Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern to see what happens next. And that's last week at the table for March 31st. Tune in on Twitch on Thursdays and Sundays to see what happens in the live games, or keep posted here to find out what happened last week at our table. Remember to always try to make your games memorable so that you can have tales from your table to share with your friends as well. Good night, everybody.